بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. طيب, so yesterday we started the first verse where we mentioned إذا الشمس كورت, and there was a few things that were remaining. Number one, we did mention a number of fawaid, but we didn't mention the actual i'rab. So in terms of i'rab, we say that إذا is called ظرفية شرطية غير جازمة. So for إذا we say ظرفية شرطية غير جازمة. Okay, ظرفية means that it is a ظرف, and إذا is in the meaning of when. And شرطية means that it entails within it, incorporates within it the ma'na of shart. And if you remember yesterday, we said this ma'na is found in إذا, and إذا is used for the meaning of shart, even though it's not in of itself, it doesn't indicate as strongly, or it's not as firmly grounded in the ma'na of shart. And then we say غير جازمة. From the adawat of shart are those that give jazm, and from the adawat of shart are those that don't give jazm. إذا does not give jazm, except according to some in certain scenarios in shi'r. In certain scenarios, إذا can give jazm. Otherwise, إذا does not give jazm. طيب. So إذا is ظرفية شرطية غير جازمة. And then we say ظرف لما يستقبل من الزمان خافض لشرطه منصوب بجزائه. طيب, what does this mean? ظرف لما يستقبل من الزمان. It means that إذا is a ظرف for the future tense. Number one. After this we said خافض لشرطه منصوب بجزائه. خافض لشرطه, meaning إذا acts as مضاف, and the جملة الشرط which comes after إذا, after the إذا will be considered في محل مضاف إليه, في محل جر مضاف إليه. And at the same time إذا itself is مبني, so it's مبني على السكون. However, it's في محل نصب. Why? Because of its جزاء. So again, إذا الشمس كورت, the جزاء over here is علمت نفس ما أحضرت. علمت نفس ما أحضرت. طيب, this is a verb. The timing of this verb is إذا الشمس كورت. So there's two things happening over here. Number one, إذا is giving us the conditional meaning. So when the sun is wrapped up in darkness, then every soul shall know what it presented forward. So the knowledge of the presentation that every soul is making, that will be done at the time when the shart is found. Therefore, إذا in reality is mansoob with this verb, yani its jaza. It's mansoob with the fi'l that comes in its jaza. So that's why they say regarding it, ظرفية شرطية غير جازمة ظرف لما يستقبل من الزمان خافض لشرطه منصوب بجزائه. Now, this is one understanding. There are other understandings as well. This will come later inshallah. So we say إذا is ظرف لما يستقبل من الزمان خافض لشرطه منصوب بجزائه. طيب, الشمس كورت. الشمس كورت, depending on whether we take the qawl of the Basriyun or the Kufiyun. If we take the qawl of the Kufiyun, then this is simply mubtada. الشمس will be mubtada, and كورت, so we say الشمس is mubtada, and كورت, this is going to be فعل مجهول plus its نائب الفاعل, which is a هي hidden inside. This can become a جملة فعلية, which enters into في محل رفع خبر. And it's the khabar of the mubtada. And this becomes a jumla ismiya, and the jumla ismiya becomes jumla to shart. That's if you take the Kufi opinion, that a jumla ismiya can become the shart of إذا. But if we take the Basri opinion, then in that situation we say that الشمس is actually نائب الفاعل لفعل محذوف يفسره المذكور بعده. So the way we would write it according to the Basri understanding is الشمس is going to be نائب فاعل لفعل محذوف يفسره المذكور بعده. طيب ما هو المذكور بعده الذي يفسره؟ That is كورت. And therefore the jumla which is كورت is going to be, we're going to explain this jumla, but this jumla, then the نائب الفاعل plus the فعل محذوف, this becomes a jumla فعلية which is جملة الشرط. And regardless whether you take the Basri opinion or the Kufi opinion, this jumla which is جملة الشرط is في محل جر بالإضافة. Why? Because again, إذا is acting as مضاف. إذا is acting as مضاف, and therefore the jumla that comes after will be considered مضاف إليه. Whether you take the Basri opinion or the Kufi opinion. نعم. So according to the Kufis, this is مبتدا, كورت is the jumla في محل رفع خبر. This jumla becomes في محل جر بالإضافة. Why? Because إذا is مضاف. And according to the Basri opinion, الشمس will be نائب الفاعل لفعل محذوف يفسره المذكور بعده, and that جملة فعلية becomes في محل جر بالإضافة. نعم. And the rest of the, طيب, if we take كورت according to the Basri understanding to be a جملة مفسرة, طيب, if we take كورة to be a جملة مفسرة according to the Basri understanding, then same thing, we're going to say نائب the فعل مجهول مبني على الفتح, and then we say ونائب الفاعل ضمير مستتر تقديره هي, and that جملة we say لا محل لها من الإعراب. Why? Because the جملة مفسرة is from those 7 جملة that doesn't have a محل in إعراب. آليت أي أقسمت أي أقسمت والقسم بر لو تاب من أصال عز وانتصر. آليت أي أقسمت أي أقسمت يعني جملة مفسرة does not experience a محل in إعراب. This is the إعراب of this sentence, and all of the next sentences that are going to come in the next verses, وإذا النجوم انكدرت وإذا الجبال صيرت, they all have the same exact إعراب. So we're not going to repeat the إعراب for each of these sentences. طيب, also one benefit that we didn't mention yesterday, which is that so we mentioned the understanding of certainty which is attained in the sentence, and another benefit is this فعل which is كورت. Why is it brought as a فعل مجهول? يعني مبني للمجهول. Why is it brought as a فعل مبني للمجهول? And why is it not brought as a فعل which the فاعل was mentioned, for example, like كورها الله, or for example it was made لازم إذا الشمس تكورت, for example, that the sun itself is getting wrapped, so it was made لازم, or it was brought in the sense that the fa'il was mentioned. So the benefit of bringing it as a fi'l majhul, we say, is to show the azama, the greatness of the one who is causing it to lose its light and causing it to get wrapped up in darkness. Okay. Why? Because when a command is given from a great king and a very powerful king, then that command is not given in the sense that it's told to every single person that, okay, the king exactly, he is commanding this and so on and so forth. The command was given. Focus on the command. And the azama, the great nature of the one who is making the command, is such that we don't need to express that great nature or we don't need to mention his name. It's already known who is the one giving the command because he has such power, he has such control. Okay. So we can say كورت أي لفت بأيسر أمر من غير كلفة ما أصلا. And there wasn't any difficulty that for this to occur to begin with. It was كورت يعني كأنه فعل فعل. It was just done. It was taken care of. It was handled. It was handled. Like, for example, sometimes you speak to some guys and you say there's a task that needs to be finished and you're worried about how it's going to be finished. So they respond by saying, don't worry, it'll be taken care of. They don't give you the whole explanation of I'm going to go take care of it in such and such manner and so on and so. Simply say it's going to get taken care of. You don't need to worry. Okay. Like, sometimes people say this, it becomes a problem because when you know the person doesn't have qudra upon it, then you start scratching your head and thinking, okay, yeah, this is one of those insha'Allah. But if you know the person has qudra upon it, like if you know that individual who says it will be taken care of genuinely has the ability to take care of it in a moment, then him saying it's going to get taken care of gives you a degree of ease, and it gives you itminan. Na'am. Like also, another benefit, we mentioned one of the benefits of repeating إذا in each of these sentences. Another benefit of repeating إذا in each of these sentences is to show that each one of these sentences is mustaqil, it's individually connected with the jaza. The jaza is علمت نفس ما أحضرت. علمت نفس ما أحضرت. If we simply said إذا الشمس كورت والنجوم انكدرت والجبال سيرت, and when all of these events happen, then every single person will realize what they presented forward. That's one way of doing it. But then the realizing only occurs once. As opposed to when we repeat إذا in each of them, then each one of them, each and every single one of these sentences is directly mustaqil, yani is connected with the madmoon of the jumlatul jawab, which is علمت نفس ما أحضرت. The content of that jumla is connected with it directly. So when this happens, when the first one happens, every soul is going to realize what it presented forward. And when the second one happens, every soul is going to realize what it presented forward. So there isn't one hasra, there isn't one moment of realization. It is a continuous moment of realization, because the trials will add up upon each other. They will add up upon each other. So it's continuously realizing, not one moment of realization, rather a continual moment of realization. Naam. طيب, moving on now to the next verse. We'll mention the rabt, as we mentioned. We're going to mention rabt between the ayat. So in نظم الدرر, he says لما كان التأثير في الأعظم دالا على التأثير فيما دونه بطريق الأولى أتبع ذلك قوله معمما بعد التخصيص. Okay, there's two things. Number one is to mention something which is khas, طيب, followed by that which is am. And you can also do the opposite, mentioning first which is am, followed by that which is khas. And this is an usloob in Arabic, to grant al-ihtimam, to grant importance to the one which was mentioned separately, which is the one that which is khas. Okay, and this is also a form of itnab. Suyuti, he says in عقول الجمان وذكر خاص بعد ذي عمومي منبها بفضله المعلوم كعطف جبريل وميكائيل على ملائك قلت وعكسه جلا. Like, what's an example of mentioning something khas, or mentioning something am first and then mentioning khas after? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what's the verse where the Jibreel and Mikael are mentioned? As he gives ishara over here, Jibreel and Mikael, the atf is happening upon malaika. نعم. من كان عدوا لله وملائكته ورسله وجبريل وميكال فإن الله عدو للكافرين. من كان عدوا لله وملائكته, the one who is enemy, who shows animosity towards Allah and his angels and his prophets. And then Allah says وجبريل وميكال, and Jibreel and Mikael. طيب, Jibreel and Mikael are already included in malaika. They're already included in malaika. So they're a part of the malaika. So this was mentioning something am first and then doing takhsis, mentioning something that was already included in the umum, mentioning it later on individually. Why? To show more significance and more importance upon that which was mentioned khas, upon that which was mentioned as khas. So ذكر خاص بعد ذي عموم منبها بفضله المعلوم. From itnab, from the prolonging of the speech, as we mentioned yesterday. This is from the, you study itnab and ijaz and balagha. From them is, or a form of it is actually to mention something which is khas, which was already included in the generic statement before, but to specify it individually. Then he says towards the end of it, وَعَكْسُهُ جَلَى. The opposite also happens, which is you mention something khas first, and then you mention something more generic after it. You mention something more generic after it. So, in the eyes of the person who is on the earth, what is greater in size? The sun or the stars? The sun. The sun seems to be larger in size. The sun seems to be greater and more powerful. And the sun seems to be something of further significance compared to, or in comparison to, the stars. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first says, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, when the sun will lose all of its light and it will be wrapped up in darkness. And then he follows up by speaking about the stars. What's happening over here, as he says, التأثير في الأعظم دال على التأثير فيما دونه بطريق الأولى. If the horrificness of that time is able to affect that which is stronger and larger and greater and more grand in such a manner that ash-shamsu kuwirat, then of course it's going to be able to affect that which is smaller and lesser in nature. And again, this is in terms of what people see on the planet. Okay, now for example, someone might say that there are some stars that are far bigger and larger than the sun. Well, that's true. But when you are on this planet, what do you see? You see the sun is massive and it's huge and it gives light to your entire planet. Whereas these stars, because of their distance, they seem like small little, they seem trivial in comparison to the sun. And so, and even if a person has knowledge of the fact that there are certain stars that are larger than the sun, even then, his immediate reaction when he thinks of the sun being destroyed and completely coming to a cease, or the light finishing off from the sun, his immediate reaction is that okay, that is a bigger deal than for the stars to lose their light. So we hear all the time, for example, sometimes scientists say that there's some galaxy in the distant future, like in the, not distant future, but the distant at a massive distance from us, that's going through some crazy, like this. There's some sort of, for example, explosion happening, and something crazy is happening, where some star is dying, for example, some black hole is being created, for example. You hear all this all the time, but you never think twice about it. Why? Because it's so far from you. You could care less. It doesn't really matter. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first started with that which is most clear and most, something which is very visible for you and it's going to affect you far more than that which is farther. Okay, so the ta'thir in that which is closer to you is going to indicate upon the ta'thir of that which is farther than you. Now, so this is the rabt. We start off with mentioning that which is akhas, which is ash-shams, and you move on to mentioning that which is a'am, which is an-nujum, and from the perspective that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to influence the sun at a time like that, then 100% the stars will also be influenced, since they are smaller in comparison to the sun in terms of their effect on humans. طيب. Second verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا النُّجُومٌ كَدَرَتْ, and when the stars, they fall dispersing. Noon, Jim, and Mim. These three letters indicate upon طلوع وظهور. طلوع وظهور. So the root letter meanings of these three letters is actually for something to rise and for something to become apparent. For something to become apparent. And this is why stars are called najm or nujum. Why? Because they are apparent in the sky. In the night sky, in the nighttime, stars are apparent with their light in the sky. And for example, they also say, وَالنَّجْمُ مِنَ النَّبَاتِ, and there's certain plants that are known as najm, مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ سَاقٍ. Okay, and the plant that doesn't have, what's it called? Like a tree that has a trunk, and plants, they have a stem. Nah. So if it doesn't have it, they call it najm. طيب. And likewise they say وَلَيْسَ لِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ نَجْمٌ أي أصل ومطلع. Okay, so the root letter meaning of najama is طلوع and ظهور. طيب. As for kadara, the root letter meaning of kadara can indicate upon two things. Kaf, da, dal, and ra can either indicate upon khilaf al-safwi, and safwi is in the meaning of purity. Okay, so the opposite of purity, which is impurity. And it can also indicate upon haraka, for something to move. Okay, so from the first one they say kadir al-ma wa kadur al-ma. When water becomes impure, becomes diluted, becomes dirty. For example, something impure falls in the water, or some dirt falls in the water, they say kadur al-ma. They say kadir al-ma. And likewise they say khudh ma safa wa da' ma kadar. Khudh ma safa wa da' ma kadar. Meaning take that which is good and pure and leave that which is impure. Okay, or leave that which is not worthy of being taken. So this is from kadara, coming the meaning of khilaf al-saf, the opposite of purity, which is impurity. And as for the other asl, they say in kadara, in the meaning of asra'a, because kadara means to be fast. So in kadara, it means to be very fast. Okay, and Khalil mentioned that, or Razi mentions in Mafatih al-Ghayb, that the asl in inkidar is insibab. for something to fall. And that's why Al-Khalil says, إن كدر عليهم القوم إذا جاءوا أرسالا فانصبوا عليهم. In Arabic, when do they say إن كدر عليهم القوم? When they come one after another and they all just rush upon and enter upon the other group of people. Okay, so if you say إن كدر عليهم القوم, if there's a group of individuals, when will you say إن كدر عليهم القوم when there's another group of people that come one after the other and they just rush into them? فانصبوا عليهم. So this is the meaning of al-inkidar. Again, it's coming from haraka, quick haraka. Okay, and as if something is falling, because when is the haraka, when is the motion the fastest? When something falls. So that's why inkidar also comes in the meaning of tasaqut, for something to fall and disperse. Okay, imagine for example if you had something is rolling off of a mountain, the way it quickly rolls off the mountain, and it will fall all the way to the ground, and eventually when it's going to fall, it's going to break into pieces. Okay, so this is the meaning of inkidar. This is the meaning of inkidar. What is the intended meaning over here? So either we say that وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. Inkadarat is simply in the meaning of dispersing, يعني انتثرت. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another place in the Quran, وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انتثرت وَالْقُرْآنُ يُفَسِّرُ بَعْضُهُ بَعْضًا. The way we understand the Quran is that we look at other verses in the Quran and we see if there are certain verses that can clarify the meaning of other verses. So Allah says in the Quran, وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انتثرت. Okay, and over here he says وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. So either this could be the meaning, that inkadara over here is in the meaning of intathara, means to disperse, to be flowing around, flying around left and right, and out of their orbits. Naam. Or we can say that the meaning of inkadara over here is adlamat, when they lose their light. And that is from the meaning of kadur al-ma, and when the water becomes diluted and dark. When initially it was pure, just like the stars, they will lose their light completely, while initially they were bright and extremely beautiful to see. So وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. And when the stars, they fall dispersing, and we can actually put in brackets, losing their light. You can actually incorporate both as well, because when they will fall, they will also lose their light. So both actually go hand in hand. They both go hand in hand. Also, interestingly, over here, the fi'l which is used is not fi'l majhul. Previous verse, Allah said, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ. As for an-nujum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. What's the farq between in fa'ala and, for example, for you to say كُوِّرَتْ? So in fa'ala, in reality, it is mutawa'a of fa'ala. So for example, they say كسر الزجاج فانكسر. So the verb is as a reaction or as a response of another verb. So someone broke the glass, therefore the glass broke. Okay, this is what we call mutawa in Arabic. So كسر الزجاج, he broke the glass. فانكسر الزجاج, therefore the glass broke. واضح. So in kadara is mutawa of kadara. Yani someone is causing dilution, or someone is causing, for example, the isra in the haraka, in the movement, and therefore they are moving quickly. They are moving quickly. So it's possible. Now, if we take this into modern understanding, although over here, a really important point to make, that some people have given different benefits of these verses from the perspective of modern scientific advancements and understandings, and so on and so forth. And that is fine as long as you accept it as a theory. The moment you accept it as the meaning of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that becomes a problem. Because science is an ever-evolving discipline. It continues to evolve based on the more you experience, the more you experiment, the more you see, the more you're exposed to, the more knowledge that is attained, the more we change our scientific understandings. So it's an ever-evolving discipline. And therefore, it is inaccurate and incorrect to associate any one given meaning of a verse of the Quran, specifically to associate with it some scientific understanding. Why? Because that scientific understanding can actually evolve. In the past, when Allah says in the Quran, وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا, Allah straightened the earth in the past. In the past, once upon a time, when they used to think scientifically it's factual that the earth was flat and not round, they used to say, look, it's proven in the Quran because Allah says, وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا. Okay, now they're saying that the earth is round and not flat. And that's proven through facts as well. So if we say that was actually the meaning of the verse, because the meaning of the verse, dahaha, could actually mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leveled the ground. Meaning when you, and that's the purpose of the mountains act as pegs. The earth doesn't shake. So when you're walking on the earth, it's not like it's shaking, even though it's moving. Normally when you're walking on something that moves, you can sense that it's moving. On the earth, when you walk on the earth, you don't sense that it's moving. It doesn't shake. So it is level. It is balanced. And that was the purpose of the mountains. Okay, placing the mountains as pegs that balances the earth and prevents it from shaking. So either you say dahaha is in this meaning, that Allah straightened and leveled the earth, as in Allah prevented it from shaking. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it such that it doesn't seem like it's circular. It seems like it's level. Or you take dahaha in the meaning of the earth is flat. Now before in the past, because they believed that was a scientific fact, they took some scholars that mentioned in their books of Tafsir that, oh look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the earth is flat. Okay, in hindsight, we say that wasn't correct. So when you ascribe a meaning to the verse of the Quran by way of something that even you might think it's a scientific fact, that is a big problem. You can mention it as a theory. It could possibly be a meaning, but we don't mention it as a scientific fact. So according to how we understand now, the way science explains the concept of the fabric of space-time, as if it's a fabric, and if it were to rip, then everything within space and time would just go in chaos and be destroyed. واضح? So it's the ripping of the fabric of space-time, and when that happens, then all of the stars that are in their orbits, they lose their orbits. The concept of gravity doesn't exist anymore, because gravity, what is it really? Because this was also a concept that evolved over time. Initially, they used to think gravity was a pulling force. Gravity was a force in the earth that pulls you down, right? And now they realize that's not actually they realize that's not actually the case. Whereas in reality, the way they give the example is that as if you have a fabric, and in that you place a ball, and you have smaller balls that are around it. The way those smaller balls will rotate around that larger ball within that fabric, because it weighs down the fabric. So any body that has a large size, including ourselves, right? But our size is very minimal, so we're not able to cause that type of a bend and curve in the fabric of space-time. But the larger bodies, they're able to cause a greater curve in the fabric of space-time. So when they cause that large curve in the fabric of space-time, then the smaller bodies around them then naturally just get pulled into, getting attracted towards these larger bodies. So the larger body in of itself doesn't have any attraction. It's not pulling anything towards it. It's actually causing a curvature in space-time. And that curvature is what the smaller, for example, bodies get caught up in, and then therefore they start orbiting around that larger body, or they get attracted and pulled into that larger body. This is the essence of gravity that they understand now. So even this understanding evolved over time. But when you cut the fabric, what's going to happen? No longer any of these balls, for example, they're no longer going to remain in any of their orbits. So you're removing the complete concept of the orbit of the stars or the sun, or anything that was in orbit is going to be removed from its orbit. And the way Allah described it by saying, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, the sun will be wrapped up, and وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ, and the stars will simply be falling because they're no longer in their orbits. They're all just falling and dispersing. طيب. Now, after having mentioned we say al-alam, after having mentioned the a'lam of the sama, after having mentioned the higher universe or the larger universe, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now in the next verses will indicate or come towards the earth. So Allah mentioned first, starting off in the first two verses, the shams, the sun, and likewise the moon. And these are the greatest creations in the sky. Now coming down towards the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will start off by mentioning the creations within the earth, and specifically specifying one of these creations, which is al-jibal. So he says, وَإِذَا الْجِبَالُ سُيِّرَتْ. Naam. So he moves on to al-jibal to bring it closer to the people. طيب. Jibal is the plural of jabal, and suyira is from sin, ya, and ra. And sin, ya, and ra indicate upon mudi and jarayan, for something to move. So the sara yasiru sayran means for something to move and travel. And likewise, naam, المسير من الثياب الذي فيه خطوط كأنه السيور. The cloth that has lines in it, they call that المسير من الثياب, because these خطوط are like suyur, different paths. Because a path, الطريقة, is also called asira, is called asira. When we say sira, we're referring to الطريقة في الشيء, the path in something, the way of something, because that's the path upon which you tread. And likewise, a normal path, a physical path, can also be called that. So when you have these lines within this piece of cloth, as if they are suyur, as if they are paths, they call that cloth al-musayyar min al-thiyab. طيب. So Allah says, وَإِذَا الْجِبَالُ سُيِّرَتْ. Again, over here, the fi'l majhul is used to indicate how easy this will be. How easy this will be. And it's not something which will be difficult for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب, there's two possible meanings over here that can be understood. Number one is that there will be a massive earthquake that will occur. And that will result in the mountains being destroyed and removed from their places. But they won't be flowing in the sky. They won't be like flying, like the pieces of the mountains will not be flying in the sky. Rather, initially there will be a massive earthquake or a zalzala that will occur, a rajfa that will occur, as is mentioned, and that will result in the mountains being moved from their actual places. I mean, they will crumble to bits. They will crumble to bits. And that is what is referenced in the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where He says, وَسُيِّرَتِ الْجِبَالِ فَكَانَتْ سَرَابًا. Like, there's another verse that also mentions regarding the reality of what will happen with mountains, which is that they will be as if they will be flying in the jaw, in al-hawa, in the sky. And that is indicated upon in the verse, تَمُرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ. Okay. So some scholars mention that this actually will occur after the second nafkha. The flying of the mountains within the sky all over the place will occur after the second nafkha, where they become haba'an manthura, as if they're like dust particles that are flying in the sky. And as for the first one, that will precede, that will be in the initial rajfa, and that will be before the nafkha. So it's simply an earthquake that will come that will cause the mountains to crumble, and Allah knows best which verse exactly is referring to which exact incident or moment. After this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. So after having mentioned the existences or the greatest creations in the sky, and mentioning one of the greatest creations of the earth, which is the mountains. And normally they say, for example, it's impossible to move a mountain. So the moving of a mountain from its place is practically impossible, simply because of how deep rooted they are in the ground. So after having mentioned the greatest creations in the heavens, in the sky, and mentioned the greatest creation on the planet, the strongest creation on the planet, and showing how the effects of that day will influence each and every single large creation that the Arabs recognize and the humans recognize. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it more personal and direct towards the human being himself, regarding the state of the human being and how his state will be at this moment. So He says, وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. And when the full term she-camels are neglected. Al-ishar in Arabic, either we say it is the plural of ushara. And what is ushara? Ishar is the jama' of ushara. And what is ushara? Ushara is that she-camel that is pregnant for 10 months. For 10 months. So when it enters into the 10 month, they call it ushara. And this type of a camel, this is the most, they say, anfasu makasib al-Arab. It was the most worthy and valuable property of the Arabs. And the Arabs in general, the camels were extremely important for them because they lived in the desert. And so the camel served many purposes. It served their ride, for example, when they're traveling. And it served as an animal that would carry for them things if they needed assistance in carrying things. And it would serve as food, for example, if they slaughtered it and ate the meat of the camel. And so for them, the camel was their life. The camel was their life. And that's why you have some of the earlier Arabs, some Jahili Arabs, in their poetry, they describe their camels. So from the adat, or from the trends of the Arabs in their poetry, is that some of them they start off, for example, describing what we call al-ghazal, where they describe women, or their mahbuba, their beloved. And some of them they would describe their camels. And some of them they do both. They start off describing, like in Banat Su'ad, he starts off with a discussion regarding Su'ad, who's his mahbuba, his beloved, but then he goes on to a discussion regarding his camel, and describing his camel, and how amazing it is, and so on and so forth. So imagine today, for example, you have a massive, amazing sports car, or a luxury vehicle, or some crazy, amazing, nice car, like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, or some amazing, amazing, nice car. The way you would talk about it, the way you describe it, the way you, in fact, in reality, someone who has that expensive of a car is probably very rich, so he doesn't really care about that car that much. The amount of the Arabs used to care about their camels. You probably won't be able to replicate that same care and consideration in today's world with regards to materialistic belongings. Simply because if you have a car that's that expensive, you're probably very rich, and so it's not that big of a deal to you. Yes, you care about it. It's nice, show it off to people, but it's not that big of a deal. The way the Arabs consider the camels, because camels were the livelihood of the Arabs. Okay, and especially they call them an-nuq al-hawamil, yani the she camels that are pregnant, and from those, especially the one that enters into his 10th month. Why? Because it's going to give birth soon. Okay, and that is obviously, if there's more camels coming into existence, more money, more everything, more livelihood, better for them in their life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. And when the full term she camels, full term meaning enters into the 10th month and it's about to give birth, these camels that are the most precious, the ones that are taken care of in the most amazing way, and the ones that are given the most regard amongst the Arabs, when they are left عُطِّلَت, completely neglected. عَطَّلَ يُعَطِّلُ تَعْطِيل means to leave something completely neglected, to care less regarding something. So the reality will be on that day for these individuals that they will be so, for anyone on that day, they will be so perplexed by the terrors and the horrific events of that day, that anything which is close to them, and the way Allah described this is وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ, that the pregnant she camel that you would take care of, the full term pregnant she camel that you will be taking care of in every way possible, if it is around you, you will not take care of it at all. Okay. Another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَ وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَ. And before that he mentioned, وَتَضَعُ كُلُّ ذَاتِ حَمْلٍ حَمْلَهَا. That every single woman that is pregnant, she will drop her child, and even the murdi'a, the one that is breastfeeding, will also could care less about her infant child. So even with human beings, the horrific events will be so great that they would not be able to focus on anything that they care of. Okay, so in reality, these are, in different verses, Allah depicts different creations that are important to the humans and personal to the humans. But in essence, what's really being intended is anything of benefit, anything that people care about, anything that they have a connection to, they will stop caring about it. What matters to them the most, they will stop caring about it. As Allah says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. So some say that, okay, now when Allah says وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ, some have given another explanation of this. They say this kalam is actually kinaya عن ترك الناس أعمالهم لشدة الهول. Okay, and that is in line with the second definition we put over here. So some said this is actually kinaya عن ترك الناس أعمالهم. And again, this is regarding what will occur before the Day of Judgment actually occurs. So people, instead of being preoccupied in their responsibilities and what they work and the work that they take care of. So for example, from the most major responsibilities is that you have to take care of the full term she camel. So when people will stop taking care of them, or these she camels that are pregnant and they're full term and they're about to give birth, and they will care less about that. Okay, that's actually a kinaya. What's actually being intended over here is, what's indicated over here is that they will leave everything that they are made responsible upon. So by mentioning the greatest responsibility and the fact that they will leave their greatest responsibility, we're also indicating that they will leave all other forms of responsibility. Okay, so if that's the intended meaning, then the way this verse would be translated is when people will neglect all their responsibilities and actions due to the severity of what they witness. Okay, this is the reasoning. That's one intended meaning. Another intended meaning, that some have mentioned is that ishar over here is not actually literally in the meaning of she camel. Rather, it's used metaphorically to indicate upon rain clouds, to indicate upon clouds. And the Arabs, they've done this. So they will use the word, for example, or the front the hamila, for example, just like because the idea is that a woman when she gets pregnant, for example, and she's about to give birth, she's preparing to give birth. And likewise, the she camel when it's pregnant, it's about to give birth, is preparing to give birth. So there will be intaj, something will come out of it. So likewise, when the rain clouds are filled with rain, then eventually they would compare it to the pregnant she camel. Because just as it's about to give birth, likewise the rain clouds are about to uh, shower upon people the rain, and they can tell that it's getting ready to and prepared to drop the rain. So they would call it ishar. Okay, the clouds were also known as ishar. طيب. So it's actually a kinaya of as-sahab. So if this is the case, and Allah also mentions this in Surah Al-Dhariyat, He says, فَالْحَامِلَاتِ وِقْرًا. And over there, al-hamilat is not referring to a woman who's pregnant, rather it's referring to the clouds. طيب. So it's possible, what's intended over here now is that the rain clouds will be filled with rain, but for some reason, they will not rain. There will be no rain, meaning there will be drought. There will be moments of qaht, where people will have no access to water, because it will stop raining. Or another way this could be intended is that the rain clouds will not form to begin with. وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. And the whole function of rain on the planet will stop occurring. And in both meanings, what's understood is that there will be qaht. So another meaning that could be taken is when the clouds will be prevented from producing rain, and therefore famine and drought will occur as a result. And so now again we have a number of meanings. We can take the literal meaning when the full term she camels are neglected, or we can say this is simply kinaya for anything which is precious to the human being, when the people will desert the most precious of their belongings due to the severity of their judgment. Or we can say this is actually isti'ara. What's intended over here is the rain or the rain clouds. So the rain clouds will be prevented from producing the rain. Or we can say that what's intended over here in al-isharu uttilat is that the people will stop fulfilling their actions and their responsibilities. Okay, so the responsibilities, people will no longer start fulfilling their responsibilities. And all of these can be understood meanings. Another meaning which has been mentioned is ad-diyar. Al-ishar over here is the meaning of their homes. Meaning the homes will be deserted and people will no longer reside within their homes because of the fear that they will be experiencing. So all of these different meanings are mentioned. With this, we'll stop inshallah and we'll continue with the next verse, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, in the next lesson.